Resolution 16, Scotland's Place in Europe, to be moved by Toni Giugliano and seconded by Joanna Cherry MP. Toni, oh, there he is.
Conference, I moved to this country, to this city, when I was 7 years old. I spoke no English, and on my first day at school, my classmates had each learned something in Italian to make me feel welcome. And I'll never forget, one of them wrote, "Welcome to Glasgow. P.S. If you're a real Italian, whereabouts is your chippy?" My family, like thousands of other migrants, came here to work. They run businesses. They teach our children. They are the lifeblood of our NHS. They make an incredible contribution to our society, just like the millions of Scots who emigrated, enriching nations across the globe. And yet, they have been demonised as benefit cheats, denied a vote in the referendum, and now used as bargaining chips. Conference, these are people's lives. It's time for the Tories to stop messing with them and guarantee their right to live here now. As John Swinney said earlier, on the morning of the 24th of June, for millions of people across the UK, the future was suddenly thrown in doubt. And in times of profound uncertainty, it's the job of politicians to steady the ship and chart a new course. The Prime Minister, he abdicated responsibility. The Chancellor, nowhere. The Home Secretary, silent. Only one leader gave that direction and reassurance, the First Minister of our country, Nicola Sturgeon. Delegates, Tory Party conference was an eye-opener. It told us everything we need to know about the kind of country they want. They want employers to list foreign workers, universities to crack down on foreign students, the NHS to replace foreign doctors, walls built across the Channel. Conference, what a reckless display of divisive nationalism. It has no place in Scotland. We will never subscribe to it. Friends, the Leave campaign was a con, led by politicians responsible for the deep inequalities that scar our society. Politicians who imposed austerity on the most vulnerable and then shifted the blame onto the shoulders of migrants. Unless Scotland takes its destiny in its own hands, these are the people who will continue to decide our future. And make no mistake, the United Kingdom that Scotland voted for in 2014 no longer exists. 2 years ago, Labour and the Tories said, vote no to protect your place in Europe. Today, we stand on the brink of the EU exit door. Delegates, those parties can never be trusted with Scotland's future again. I am proud that Scotland voted emphatically to remain in the EU. Brexit never was and never will be in our national interest. Strathclyde University say a hard Brexit will lead to 80,000 fewer Scottish jobs by 2026. And if the UK does stay in the single market, the price tag will be $5 billion a year just to access it. Friends, that is the absurdity of Brexit, paying more for what we already had. But whether you count yourself as a Euro enthusiast or a Eurosceptic, this is now much bigger than that. This is about Scotland's right to be heard. Theresa May came to Scotland pledging to listen, but she's since made clear that the only voice that matters is her own. So we face a choice. Do we continue to be dismissed and ignored as a nation, or do we take our place in the world as a constructive member of the international community as an independent country? Conference, I will conclude because my lights are flashing in front of me. We voted to stay in the world's largest market. We voted to protect our workplace rights. We voted to safeguard our right to live and work across the continent. So the message to the Prime Minister is this: the days of Scotland being sidelined are over. Remain means remain. Our voice will be heard.
Joanna Cherry MP to second.
Good afternoon, fellow delegates. Like Toni, I'm the daughter of an immigrant. My mum came over from Ireland more than 50 years ago to do her midwifery training and stayed in Scotland. And she always says that she brought her daughters up not to be Irish nationalists, and she's ended up with two wee rampant Scottish nationalists instead. But of course, Scottish nationalism, like modern Irish nationalism, is very internationalist and outward-looking in its expression. And it's important to remember this motion this afternoon is not about whether or not we should stay in the European Union. That's already been decided. Overwhelmingly, 62% of Scots voted to remain. This motion is about ensuring the democratic will of that vote is respected. And as the First Minister said yesterday, that doesn't mean to say we don't listen to those who voted to leave the European Union, but primarily we have to respect the democratic mandate of those who voted to stay. During the referendum, the independence referendum, as you'll all remember, Ruth Davidson and others repeatedly told us that the only way to guarantee Scotland's continued membership of the European Union was to vote to stay in the UK. Well, that promise, like so many they made, has now been broken and revealed for the lie it always was. Because when that promise was made, Ruth Davidson knew very well that it was going to be in her party's manifesto to have a referendum on Europe, and there was a real risk would be taken out. The only party that can protect Scotland's position in Europe is the SNP, and we have to do that by being strong and standing up against the xenophobia and the arrogance of this horribly right-wing government. And we need to make it very clear to Ruth Davidson and her nasty right-wing colleagues down south that no amount of hectoring and bullying will prevent us from holding a second independence referendum if necessary. The Tory party in Scotland fought the last Holyrood campaign on a single issue, that there should never again be an independence referendum, and they lost dismally and came a distant second. By contrast, the SNP Scottish Government won a historic third term with the highest mandate of any government in Western Europe, and on a manifesto which clearly said that if there was a material change of circumstances, such as Scotland being forced to leave the European Union against her will, then we would hold a second independence referendum. So, Conference, let's be very clear. We have a democratic mandate to do that if necessary, and it is our duty to do it if necessary. And let me say very clearly to Ruth Davidson, you don't get to dictate what happens in Scotland. That is up to the Scottish people.
Fiona Hyslop, Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs in the Scottish Government. Conference, in supporting this motion, I want to make it quite clear that this motion is entirely consistent with the position set out by the First Minister yesterday. MPs would be voting against the Brexit bill, and Alex and Graham, I have sympathies with some of the arguments that you're making and taking, but our options will be still left open in supporting this motion. Conference, I want to share with you my activities as the Scottish Government Cabinet Secretary leading on international relations in Europe. First of all, I want to put on record my thanks to the team that we have in working with me on Scotland's place in Europe. We have our Deputy Minister for Europe, Allan Allan. We have the Minister for UK Negotiations, Mike Russell. We have our two MEPs, Alan Smith and Ian Hudgton, and our Westminster team, Alex Salmond on Foreign Affairs, Stephen Gethins on Europe, Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh on International Trade, and Joe McAlpine, MSP, chairing that parliamentary committee. That is a formidable team working on our behalf on Europe. And my role has been to make sure we had a plan ready in the first place to provide leadership and reassurance if the UK voted to leave. Delegates, we were the only one with a plan. And the leadership shown by Nicola Sturgeon from day one has been outstanding, and I can tell you has made a big impact across Europe. And do not underestimate the solidarity given to EU nationals, and what that means across Europe. I'm also responsible for taking the position of Scotland to the heart of Europe, and to make sure it's understood by the EU 27 governments. So yesterday, as the First Minister was setting out our position in opposing the Brexit bill for more powers to Scotland and also for the publication of the independence referendum bill, I was on a stage in Brussels yesterday announcing the very same thing, simultaneously taking our message to the heart of Europe. And in recent weeks, I have been in Paris, I've been in Italy, I was in Brussels yesterday, I will be again next week, and I'll also be in Malta, we'll be holding the European presidency. So our message is very clear, that in terms of Theresa May, if you want to make Brexit Britain lead to the breakup of Britain by heading for a hard Brexit, that is your choice and that is your responsibility. Scotland did not vote to leave the EU. The UK vote was not for a hard Brexit. This country can be everything it can be, but we will do so as an international nation. We are a national party because we are international. Let's keep our options open. Let's argue for a progressive international position for Scotland and let this country be everything it can be.
Convener, thank you. Before Brexit, and it's sometimes difficult to believe there was anything before Brexit, I had booked a few days in Iceland this week. And I've just come back and I can report to you that the First Minister is as big a star in Iceland as she is here. I can also report to you that Iceland is having a vigorous debate about Europe. They're members of the European Economic Area. They think that there may be advantages or disadvantages in that. They're having the type of debate that we had in the run-up to June the 23rd. But there are two big differences. The first is we had the debate and we decided what we wanted to do by a whopping majority. And the second thing is when they decide, and the second difference is this, when they decide in Iceland what they want to do, as a nation, they will do it. Our problem is, whatever we decide, there are attempts to stop us doing it. So we have to go into this debate and we have to go into these negotiations as a nation. We have to speak as a nation. We have to discuss as a nation. We have to act as a nation. And that is what we will do at every stage of the negotiations. And to do that, we'll go in as a nation with distinctive Scottish characteristics. This is a nation of the mind. This is a nation of the Enlightenment. So we'll go in with a rational approach against irrationality, a constructive approach against prejudice. And we'll go in trying to be a beacon to others who believe that the right thing to do in these circumstances is to show a constructive, positive view of the world, a view that says, come and join us, not go away, we don't want you. Now, the First Minister stressed in what she said yesterday that it was absolutely vital that we looked after our national interest. And I will not be, you will not be told what that national interest is by Ruth Davidson or Kezia Dugdale or David Davis or Boris Johnson. We've been in this party long enough to know what the national interest of Scotland is. It used to be, if you remember, on our membership cards, the furtherance of all Scottish interests. And we've been having that debate in the Scottish Parliament week after week. We've been talking about the issues that we need to address. And there are many and varied. But we'll go into negotiations to address them, to speak about them, not to be spoken for. We will not accept the arrogant assumption that we can sit in the corner while somebody else speaks on behalf of the vital interests of Scotland. That will never happen. Never, ever. Convener, as I conclude, I want to remind Conference of one thing. In Royal Terrace in Edinburgh, a route I take to St Andrew's House in the morning, there is a plaque and a French flag. The French flag marks the place of Free French House. The plaque marks a tribute that de Gaulle made to Scotland during the Second World War. The oldest alliance in the world, he called it. He unveiled that plaque in 1942, on the 23rd of June, 1942, 74 years before the referendum. We are the people of the oldest alliance in the world. That is an alliance with France and with Europe. We will never give it up. Never.
Thank you, Chair. Conference, who would you trust to stand up for Scotland's interests? The Scottish Government led by Nicola Sturgeon, or a Tory government whose antics are simply an international embarrassment? They are a total and utter shambles. Let's look at their record, Conference. No plan, no timescale, no agreement. And despite personally appointing the three Brexiteers, Liam Fox, David Davis and Boris Johnson, time after time, Theresa May clarifies, explains away or flatly contradicts them. We can't trust this Tory government to get the best deal from this process, Conference. They don't even trust each other. But there is one thing this Tory government agree on: demonising and demeaning others because of where they come from. The intolerant rhetoric that flowed freely from their party conference in Birmingham was disgusting. At a time when the ugly face of prejudice, xenophobia, misogyny, sexism, homophobia and racism is raising its head with increased vigour, their behaviour is nothing short of irresponsible, and they do not speak for us. So from the children of immigrants who are bullied at school to their parents who fear for their livelihoods, we will not walk by you, we stand by you, we stand with you, and together we will stand tall. At the ballot box on the 23rd of June, Scotland demonstrated its internationalist vision. That is our mandate. We'll explore every avenue and exhaust every opportunity to protect our place in the EU. But let's be clear, if the current constitutional arrangements prevent that, voters must have the opportunity to choose their own path. Independence for Scotland. Please support this motion.
MSP to speak in favour of the resolution.
Conference, many of us stayed awake all night on the night of the referendum, and I had the privilege of staying awake all night at the Grangemouth Sports Centre, where the Scottish results were added up. It was a strange place and a night of mixed emotions, but we didn't have long to contemplate those mixed emotions, because at 7 a.m, the Grangemouth ladies hockey team came into the sports hall and demanded the use of it. But although there wasn't much time to think about the situation, although there wasn't much time for the rest of us to take in what had happened, we are very fortunate that we have a First Minister who reacted quickly and who said things that needed to be said. Because after the ugly tone of the referendum, our First Minister, and we should be proud of this, said to people from other EU countries resident in Scotland, "We need you. This is your home. We want you to stay." Now, of course, since then, the UK government has largely been unable to explain what Brexit means, other than for them to say that just about everything, including community cohesion, the single market, can be sacrificed on the altar of ending the very freedom of movement of people on which the EU itself is founded. Well, Conference, I think we all of us probably have news for the UK government, because this country didn't volunteer to have a Brexit referendum. This country voted to stay. And while Boris probably didn't think about Scotland very much in the course of the referendum, this country has a government who will make sure that Boris and Theresa May have to think about Scotland now.
Conference, it has been indeed a fantastic debate. I've just heard Allan saying, let's bring it back at some other point. Conference, I don't want to bring it back at some other point. I want to tell Theresa May now that remain means remain. I don't want to wait 2 months or 3 months down the line to give the reassurance to 170,000 EU nationals in this country, that reassurance that they're waiting for, that this party, that this country stands by them. Sending this motion back today, rejecting this motion back today, is a slap in the face to providing that reassurance to 170,000 people that want that reassurance now. So I appreciate that some people might not like some of the wording, and perhaps it's not strong enough in places. But this is an opportunity, and we cannot miss an opportunity at a time when the bargaining will begin in Brussels and in London. We need to make our position clear, that Scotland will no longer be sidelined, that we will no longer be an afterthought on Westminster's agenda. And I just want to come back to a couple of points that have been made throughout the debate if I have time. Remember our manifesto. We made it clear. Material change. Europe was one of them. This is a material change, and if we do not stay in Europe, we have the right to call an independence referendum to protect our national interest. That's what this is about. I also want to reiterate the work, and speaking after Mike Russell and also Fiona Hyslop, our two ministers that are leading this engagement work in Brussels. I think that this is to accept this resolution, to move this resolution today, would be to also endorse the work that they are doing in Brussels, and I think it's absolutely crucial that we send that message to the Prime Minister from the banks of the Clyde all the way to the Palace in Westminster, that remain means remain. Thank you. Support the resolution.
Okay, Conference, we're going to move to the vote. Could I see cards in favour of the remit back? And could I see cards against the remit back? The remit back falls. We move to the resolution. Can I see cards in favour of the resolution? Can I see cards against the resolution? The resolution is passed overwhelmingly.